please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, the Reserve Bank of India has announced two crucial decisions on digital transactions in order to ring-fence Indian consumers and the economy. The central bank has cracked down on cryptocurrencies, barring regulated entities from providing services to any individual or business dealing in virtual currencies. Now, those entities that provide such services like cryptocurrency exchanges have been given 3 months' time to make the transition or exit out. In fact, the central bank is also studying the desirability and feasibility of its own digital currency. It has set up a panel to explore the possibilities, and the panel is expected to submit its report by the end of June 2018. The Reserve Bank is also attempting to make online transactions more secure. It's asked all payment system operators to store their data in servers inside India. Those who store data outside the country have been given 6 months' time to comply. To discuss the fine print of these orders and the impact they could have, I now have with me cyber law advocate N.S. Napinai, Vishal Gupta, the founder and CEO of searchtrade.com, and Pankaj Jain, founder of Blockhack. My colleague Manisha Gupta also here with us. Appreciate you joining us here. Ms. Napinai, let me start by asking you, and there is confusion on whether this now effectively means that the Reserve Bank has banned trading in cryptocurrencies.
I wouldn't go so far as to say that this circular amounts to a ban, but it has kind of like created a block on the money flow. The way the exchanges, the cryptocurrency exchanges or brokerage firms were working were through the banking processes. Their USP was that they were providing a platform where they would ensure KYC norms were met, and ensured that illegal activities were not being performed through the use of cryptocurrencies. With the possibility of doing these transactions using the banking channels being closed out, the risk that we run is that there is a possibility that it is moving to a cash system. So I would not say it's a complete ban on cryptocurrencies. It's merely a ban on the entities that RBI regulates dealing in this field.
Well, that's a fair point. Vishal, getting you in the conversation as well, we do understand there's a big number of the Indian investors who are invested into cryptocurrency trading as well, and that is something that the RBI doesn't like. So while there is a list of RBI concerns that, as Ms. Napinai just put out, there is a bigger concern also of the people who are invested into this. So, there are a lot of investments as well. So to start with, what is your sense on what would happen now? And also, what is the Indian percentage of the global trade that India holds right now? And would that or not have an impact on the international trade from this?
So in case of India, we have a larger investor base than a trader base. Indians don't necessarily trade a lot of cryptocurrency, but a lot of Indians are invested in cryptocurrency. And if they've taken savings, and they're looking at it as a long-term asset. And I mean, right now the numbers could be in millions of potential people who hold cryptocurrencies. Now, I mean, we appreciate that government wants to come up with laws and policies to regulate, and we understand government's concerns. But at the same time, we also have to look at the human side of the story, where we've got millions of potential people who are holding on to some kind of cryptocurrency, and if they do not have ability to transact with the cryptocurrency, essentially this becomes a dead asset for everybody who holds cryptocurrency within India, because they cannot make any transaction with these cryptocurrencies. So how is this going to impact these people, and how much money is invested, and what kind of economic impact this situation could have is something that needs to be analyzed.
Ms. Napinai, you want to, comment on the point that was just being made there, that this is now virtually a dead asset. You said you wouldn't go as far as to say it's a ban, but if Vishal is saying that it now becomes a dead asset, what do people who have already invested do?
Yes, that's a fair point, because in fact, I have been heard to say many times that a government regulatory body can't just resort to cautionary notes. More so when so many investors are getting into the market. From 2013 till date, several millions, as Vishal just mentioned, have got into the market. The reason why I said it doesn't amount to a complete ban is the RBI has not stopped either investors from investing, or from exchanges from functioning, or from investors from exiting. even the exit clause provided in the circular is for the entities regulated by RBI to exit within a specific period of time. So given that, there is an option available to investors. The three options which we discussed earlier also, Shireen, which is that they may either seek to exit, they may move their cryptocurrencies to alternate jurisdictions, or they can wait and watch. Now, with the wait and watch, what is likely to happen is that they may run the risk of their positions getting diluted further. I would not say that the statement of the finance minister in February and RBI's action today is an indicator of where the government committee is likely to go, but it is definitely not that bright that you would assume it would go completely in favor of allowing everything and anything utopian that the cryptocurrency market would have wanted. So given that, I would definitely say that investors should exercise very, very stringent caution.
Yeah. Ms. Napinai, all the three options that you put out, exit, I believe, is going to be very difficult to do now. Moving jurisdiction out is something that doesn't sound very legit. Yeah. So, Vishal, if you had an option to do one of these three, what is the easiest way out to get the money back?
I mean, the funny situation is, a friend of mine called me today. He said this is literally demonetization of cryptocurrency in India. Why? Because you're essentially left with an asset which you cannot monetize. And if you're going to monetize it outside India, it might be deemed illegal. So if you're stuck with an asset which you can't sell for a check payment to another friend or through an exchange, and you cannot collect that cash, and if you want to collect that cash in your bank account could potentially be seized. So it creates a huge conundrum for most people who are holding on to cryptocurrencies.
Let me go across to Pankaj and bring him into the conversation. Pankaj, you've heard what the legal expert has said on the program, and you've also heard what Vishal has said. What do you make of it, Pankaj, saying that this virtually amounts to demonetization of crypto assets?
Yeah, look, I think that this is a knee-jerk reaction that's probably been in the making for some time, but it's a knee-jerk reaction to the arrest of Amit Bharadwaj this afternoon. There's a lot of people that have lost money, legitimate money, not illegitimate money, but legitimate money to scammers. That's been the biggest challenge, especially in India over the last couple of years, where scammers were preying on the less educated and less sophisticated investor. Crypto is not an easy investment to make. It's not an easy investment to hold. And there's extreme volatility. It is a very high risk asset class, and even more risky than startups. But it's a new technology, and the value that crypto holds over the long run is immense. And for the government to come out and make a knee-jerk reaction is, in my opinion, a little. It's a little hard to digest. On the one hand, you have the income tax department sending out subpoenas.
Yeah. Let me interrupt you, Pankaj, because this is actually not the government. This is the Reserve Bank which has put out the circular. We're in fact waiting for the government to come out with what its position will be. There was a committee that was set up which hasn't come back with its recommendations so far. So what position the government is likely to take on this? What has been made amply clear to us in my conversations with the government so far is they don't recognize crypto currency. Crypto assets is what they're looking at, and that is the terms of reference as far as that committee is concerned. So we still have to wait to see what the government decides. This is only what the Reserve Bank has to say.
But the RBI is a part of the government, right? And there should be some sort of cohesive policy that the Reserve Bank, the Finance Ministry, the SEBI, everyone is working on together, right? And to me, this is an indication that there are different parts of the government that are moving in different directions, which is even more confusing for the average investor. And that sends an even bigger sign. Like, I don't know how much Bitcoin has crashed on the Indian market in the last 2 hours since this has happened, but I think it's over a lakh. The price has come down, right? So for those people that are scared and perhaps a little less sophisticated, the RBI just came out with something that's going to force them to lose money and sell at a significantly lower price than they would have sold this morning, right? Because there's no cohesive policy. If the income tax department is coming to people and saying, hey, tell us how much trading you did and pay 30% on your trades, and we're not going to bother you. That's great. Fantastic. We can trade legally. We're paying our taxes. We're good citizens. But then at the same time, the RBI comes out and says, oh, you can trade, but you can't convert to fiat, and you can't take rupees. So now the income tax department is not going to collect tax, or they can collect tax on crypto to crypto. Is crypto to crypto still going to be allowed? We believe that it's still going to be allowed, but is the tax man going to come and say, okay, now you have to pay taxes on crypto to crypto, regardless of whether you're actually making money in rupees, right? So it's all disjointed at this point.
Okay. Let me quickly get in a word in from Ms. Napinai before I toss it across to Manisha. You know, we were discussing this earlier, and the point that Pankaj just made, that, you know, there has to be a cohesive approach. This is the circular that's been put out by the Reserve Bank of India, and I would imagine if this is the position that the RBI has taken, then this is likely to be the position that the government and that government committee is likely to take as well. Is that the expectation now on reading what the Reserve Bank has put out, Ms. Napinai?
I may say that it's probably as speculative to jump to conclusions on this as the market itself is on cryptocurrencies. But then if one were to draw interpretations, then yes, the RBI's say is definitely going to carry a lot of weight in how the government is going to decide its policy with respect to cryptocurrencies. So I would not say that it would be far off the mark to assume that.
You know, I want to take the earlier a leaf out of the earlier conversation, really, where we talked about on how delayed perhaps this action is from the RBI, because the government knew, the RBI knew on how many people, the number of people that were getting into cryptocurrencies. And this one is to you, Vishal, because if we look at the volatility, I'm assuming in last 15,000 a Bitcoin to $6,000 to $7,000 per Bitcoin is how it's trading today. But just to get the number on, I remember in January 2017, I think the India's global share perhaps was 2 to 3%, and this January that turned to 8 to 10%. That is the kind of involvement or volume that India perhaps was contributing to the global trade. Where does that stand right now, and will that have an impact to the global trade if India actually shuts this down?
So India has a huge impact in terms of the holdings of cryptocurrencies, and this is not just limited to we're not just limited to Bitcoins. There are Ethereums, there are Ripples, and other kind of currencies people hold in India. So India traditionally has been more investors market where people have just essentially bought cryptocurrencies and stocked them. That said, the impact of India in terms of actual traded volumes is not more than 1 or 2%, because the Indian exchanges don't drive a lot of volume. And a lot of Indians don't trade overseas because it's completely illegal and it's impossible to move cash from overseas to India. So the Indians are not heavily involved on the trading side, but Indians are definitely involved in terms of accumulating side of the business. That said, you still end up in the situation where you brought the point earlier that, has the government been very delayed? The problem is, if the government, in its wisdom, thought they did not want the propagation of cryptocurrency in India, and they came up with a clear circular maybe 3 or 4 years back, before this whole wave took over India and millions of people got involved, that would have been a better choice. Now, since that has already, that water has already passed under the bridge and we know where we are today, I think we need to take a more mature approach and more pragmatic approach to the situation, because we can't be in a situation where you leave millions of people in a lurch. And the amount of capital invested, considering a lot of people in India who bought during the peak have already lost a lot of value, and they might want to hold on to these investments for maybe next 18 to 24 months and hope the market will recover and they might be able to gain their capital. A lot of these people are also sitting on capital losses, because most of them have bought into at the peaks of the market, that November, December, January, when the markets were really, really doing well. A lot of people walked into this space.
Ms. Napinai, we've had this chat earlier as well, and when we were listening into the Reserve Bank's press conference, we heard the deputy governors there say several times over that, look, the Reserve Bank has come out time and time again and advised people to be cautious about investing in virtual currencies and cryptocurrencies and so on and so forth. But that's clearly not good enough, as we've discussed. Come out with a clear guideline, and perhaps this is the first time that they've come out with a clear guideline on their approach on dealing with this. But given the fact that, where the RBI itself is now talking about a digital currency, and they've set up a panel to explore that possibility, which they hope will bring in its recommendations by June of this year. Given the context of moving towards blockchain and so on and so forth, do you think when the government, which is looking at this issue, puts out its recommendations, they should look at what the future looks like, you know, the moves of technology, and then put a regulatory architecture in place that will be sort of in sync with what we're seeing the world over.
Shireen, yes, my position has always been that if you genuinely believe that cryptocurrency is your enemy, then isn't it better to keep your enemies closer? Because, you know, how are you going to ban it? How are you going to just, you know, turn a blind eye to it? It's there. It's already come into, as Vishal mentioned, several million persons' lives. So a regulatory process, even if it is a soft regulation or something which would give the government oversight, may be the better alternative than to just close our eye to it. But then to address your question with respect to the government's digital currency, that would definitely stand on a different footing from the other cryptocurrencies which are doing the rounds now of private, privately driven cryptocurrencies like Bitcoins, etc. Because anything that a government gives out would still have the validation as fiat currency.
Yeah, it'll have the sovereign backing it. Yeah,
exactly. So therefore, that digital currency may not necessarily stand on the same footing as privately driven ones. And therefore, anything that a government may decide on that aspect is not really going to help the other cryptocurrencies. It is just that given the fact that it has taken a very vague stand till now, several million persons or investors are likely to be affected. It is possibly a better alternative for them to look at regulating it rather than just turning a blind eye to it or just taking a very drastic step of a ban, which they may or may not be able to really enforce.
Yeah, Pankaj, very quickly, you wanted to come in.
No, I just wanted to say that, you know, a government issuing a digital currency doesn't have any of the real value that cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin offer. One of the biggest values of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin is decentralization and the fact that there is no one that controls it, right? It's fixed in value. It's not printed and minted as a government pleases or needs to print money. It's not inflationary. It's inherently deflationary by value. These are values that this is what attracts people to currencies like Bitcoin, right? A government coming out, whether it doesn't matter which government it is, they're going to have an unlimited supply of coins that they will print. It's not. It's just taking a fiat currency and putting a digital face to it. It's no different, right? Digital. It may be a public ledger, but it may be a private ledger. I find it hard to believe that any government is going to make their ledger public. They're going to have it for themselves. So every time you transmit a digital rupee or a digital dollar, they'll know where you're transmitting it. But I can't see who else is transacting on that blockchain. So I think there's a huge difference between government, sovereign-controlled currencies and crypto.
Fair point. We're completely out of time, but I want to bring in a quick comment from both Pankaj as well as Ms. Napinai. And Pankaj, I'll start by asking you, the other decision that the Reserve Bank has taken, and that has to do with the payments operators, is that the data must be in India, and they've given payment operators 6 months to make that transition. Who do you see this impacting, and what do you believe it's going to mean for the WhatsApps and the Google Pays of the world?
You know, I think that's probably not the biggest problem that WhatsApp or Paytm or any of these other guys are going to have to face. Yeah, you know, the biggest concern that any technology company has is, will my data center be secure? Will my data center be able to handle the transaction volume and of coming in and out of the servers? Is the data center going to be able to scale as I scale, right? And at this point in time, data center market in India is fairly limited. And it's relatively small, right? The interconnectivity to the internet isn't as good as it is in Singapore. It's getting better. It will take time. So there will be some impact. Companies are going to have to readapt. Amazon is moving data centers here for AWS. So some companies will decide to move over to Amazon or Microsoft Azure and put it in India. I don't see that as the biggest problem in the world. You know, it's okay.
So it's something that they will get around and get by. Ms. Napina, a quick word from you on what this could mean?
Yes, I would say it may not be that simplistic. The whole concept of data localization was a very large issue that was discussed by the Data Protection Committee that has been appointed by the government. And the push for data localization started with that. Today, the RBI has jumped ahead of the committee to say that it has to happen with the payment systems. And I would say this goes way beyond the WhatsApps and the Facebooks of the world, because you have your regular UPI payments, you have your, even the Paytms or whatever kind, will have to start doing data localization. The debate here, I'm not going to give an opinion on it, but the debate here is that on one hand, the data, what the RBI is seeking is for better protection of personal and particularly financial data. I would not say that's a bad thing at all. It's definitely something we need to really worry about, how much of data flow is happening outside India. The flip side of it is, if we are talking about data localization, and if this is just the tip of the iceberg, then that spells doom for a lot of technology companies going forward.
Well, we are still awaiting the recommendations of the Sri Krishna Committee, and we're given to understand that around the 15th of May is when we could see that committee submit its recommendations on the data protection legislation. Whether we're going to see that legislation come about in this calendar year, we don't know, but that's certainly something to watch out for. Well, Vishal, Pankaj and Ms. Napinai and Manisha, thanks very much for joining us on this show. I don't believe we've heard the last of this, and we are going to now see what the government has to say. So we will continue this conversation and this discussion. But for today, thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV18. We'll take a break. There's a lot more coming up. Don't go anywhere.